Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host today. My guest today is Jonny Beardmore, and this has to be one of the more interesting stories that I've come across. In fact, I found out about Jonny through a Wall Street Journal article that I read just a few weeks ago, and was so intrigued that I thought I'd just take a whim and send him a message on Instagram, and lo and behold, he responded. Jonny's nickname is the Galapagos Postman, and you'll find out why here shortly. But what's cool about this story is not just that he's delivering handwritten letters to people left behind in the Galapagos Islands to different parts of the world over a year's time, but he has an inspiration for why he's doing it and the money that he's raising through his efforts, and he has a purpose for what he's trying to discover through this own adventure and the challenge that he's putting himself through. And that purpose is, are we disconnected as a species? And if we are, how can we reconnect into the relationships that are most important to us? And I think Jonny does a brilliant job of describing what he's found and what it's meant to him in his own life. And it certainly was inspiring to me to spend the hour or so talking through that with him. We cover a lot of ground with this, and I think you're going to be as intrigued by his story as I was. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with the Galapagos Postman. Jonny Beardmore, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. You and I have been chit-chatting here for a few minutes, and so I think I'm ready to go with questions queued up about your adventure, which has to be one of the most unique things I've ever heard. I mentioned to you, I came across your story in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of weeks ago and thought I'd take a flyer and reach out to you on Instagram. And sure enough, you responded back, and here we are. So welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for reaching out. I'm always happy to chat about these sorts of things.
Great. You have the title now of the Galapagos Postman. And so I'd love to start there and just share a little bit of the story of what you're doing. And I think we can launch from there into, the millions of questions that I have for you.
Sure. Nothing's off limits, mate. You can ask away. So yes, I am Jonny Beardmore, aka the Galapagos Postman. And this year I'm undertaking the Galapagos Postman Challenge, which involves, I've collected 50 letters from an ancient postbox on the Galapagos Islands in Isla Floriana. There is an ancient postbox that's been there since 1793, as far as we can go back in history. And that letterbox has been there with sailors and whalers in the past, putting their mail in, and people would, come sailing past, and if they were going in the right direction, they would take that mail and they would deliver it by hand. That tradition is still alive today, and this postbox sits on this random beach in Post Office Bay all by itself. Nothing else there but this postbox. And now tourists come and go as when they're sailing around the Galapagos, and they'll stop in and they're encouraged to put a postcard or a letter into the postbox, send it to friends or family, whoever they wish. And then if they look through the other postcards that are in there, they might find one that's near where they are, and they're encouraged to take it and to deliver it by hand.
Oh, okay.
Now, most people might take one or two, and if they're delivering it, I have taken 50 and from across the entire globe, and I'm spending 12 months delivering them all by hand.
Okay, so this post box is sitting on a beach. I imagine, is it an island that has no other inhabitants? It's just...
It has 180 residents and scientific people living on it, and tourists mostly that are sailing around by boat. The boats come in overnight, park outside. Everybody just takes the boat onto the beach. They're there for literally half an hour.
I imagine that this box, a wooden box, has had to have been repaired at times since 1793.
It's not the original. It's not the original barrel anymore. No, they've had to replace it a few times, I'm sure.
And how did you find out about this? Were you just happened to be in the Galapagos Islands and saw it, or is this something you researched?
Good question. I went to the Galapagos January of 23, so a year and a half ago now, and I was just there as a tourist, always wanted to go. It was a bucket list item. And we were there and we were sailing around and we went to the postbox and went, oh, how cool is this? Posted my letter to my mum and then took a couple of letters for London, where I'm based, and came back to London after the trip and went and delivered them. And it was a buzz. We just rocked up, knocked on the door, no idea who we were, going to see, and we were welcomed in by the recipient. And it was a real buzz. And I thought, wow, that's quite cool. Maybe I'd like to do a bit more of that.
Okay, so there's got to be more to the story between the point of delivering a couple letters and getting a little buzz out of it, and then creating this challenge of spending the better part of a year traveling around the world with these 50 letters. So take me through the process of how you decided to go into this and a little bit of the planning too.
Sure. So I'm sort of an adventurer by sort of passion. I love to go out exploring, traveling, seeing the world. I love it. And I try to avoid working at all costs so I can do this, but needs must pay for it all.
That's right.
And I was on the lookout for a new challenge. My father was diagnosed in 2014 with motor neurone disease. So, North America will be familiar as ALS, from the Ice Bucket Challenge and that history. And he got that just after I'd come back from driving across Asia. My last big trip was I drove from London out to Malaysia and then back to London again over 9.5 months. And I sort of filmed that and I made a documentary, and it was a big challenge, and I had a break after that. And he got diagnosed and I couldn't really go and do anything big. And he was only meant to last 2 or 3 years, which is the average. And he lasted 8. And so he sadly, he passed in a year and a half ago in sort of October of 2022. And in all that time, I knew that I was itching to get out there to do another big challenge of something. And I knew that it would have something to do with him. He would be an inspiration behind it, and it would have something to shine a light on motor neuron sufferers, and they lose their ability to speak, they lose their mobility and walk around, yet their brain is 100% perfect. And so with that in mind, when he passed, I then started actively looking at what would be that sort of next challenge to weave that in. I was looking at something to go a bit bigger and more challenging than I'd done on my last one. And the logistics of driving across 30 countries and 30,000 miles over 8.5, 9 months is quite significant in its own right. So to go bigger, it was like, well, I'll go global. And then I was just in the Galapagos, and we came across the letterbox and the letters, and the idea formed from there that, hey, perhaps I could go back, I could get a whole bunch of letters, and I could just go and travel around the world and deliver them by hand. And I'd meet people that's what I love to do. It's a journey that has a purpose to it. It's reconnecting with people in the world. It's getting out, meeting strangers. It's re-energizing myself when I go out and I meet new people, new cultures, and I travel and have new experiences. So that all sort of came together from that to the idea that sort of I kind of decided about March or April last year that this was what I would do.
That's very cool. Yeah, in the States, some folks may know it as Lou Gehrig's disease. That's
it's another one. Yep.
ALS.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple very close clients with spouses that have died from that disease. It is devastating. And so kudos to you to turning it on its head and saying we're going to make some good out of this, and bringing awareness and raising money. And I'm certainly going to link to your donation pages in addition to your LinkedIn page. And you showed me the beautiful T-shirt that you're selling also prior to us starting this. So I'm going to highlight that as well, because I want to help you get the word out and encourage folks to get involved and maybe encourage you as you're going along the way too. So I think that prompts a couple questions for me also of how you even got into adventuring. It sounds to me like your dad was a very important part of your life, and so you've overlapped this desire with adventure with family values to an extent. But how far back does that go? Is adventure something you've always been drawn to, or is that later in life?
Interesting question. I guess, I mean, I'm from New Zealand originally. I grew up there and I spent the first 25 years of my life in New Zealand where we have everything really. You know, you can go out and play any sport. You've got all the, mountains, you've got the sea. You know, as a kid, it's a fantastic place to grow up. But being so isolated, so far away, we never really explored anywhere else other than I think I'd been to Australia before I left to come to the UK at 25. And so all of those years, without really realizing it, there was some influences. Like my auntie went overseas for a couple of years on her overseas experience. My father used to travel around the Pacific Rim for China, US, Asia for work. And so I was always sort of just subtly seeing out into the
I
world.
see.
And I started to become curious. And after I finished university, I did my sort of commerce degree and try to have a career, and I didn't really kind of have a sort of set plan, but eventually it was come over to the UK because we get a working holiday visa here. You can stay for a couple of years and you can work and you can explore and you can travel. And that was really when my sort of eyes opened about the sort of traveling and exploring the world. And within a very short period of time, I was loving it, knew that I didn't want to go back to New Zealand immediately. And so I looked at ways to stay. And it was 25 years ago, and I'm still based here in London.
What was it that made it clear that you didn't want to go back to New Zealand?
Oh, it wasn't that I don't. New Zealand is still my favorite place in the world to visit, to go on
Really?
holiday. It's amazing. I got friends, family, and know my way around, and it's a great spot. But it's this curiosity to explore the rest of the world that I suffer from. I suffer the affliction that I could say that I suffer from is eternal wanderlust. I'm always curious to meet places, people, and places, and go somewhere new. And I'd love to go to all the countries in the world. I'm working my way through it slowly but surely. Over the last 25 years, I've gone from having been to two countries when I left in 1998 to I'm up to about 114 now, 25 years later. And I just love exploring new places and meeting new people and doing trips, whether they be small, or whether they be grandiose. It's just, and it's that adventure element and exploring, of the world that I love doing.
What's one of the, other than traveling to different spots, do you have a particular adventure in mind that was maybe a more difficult physical challenge or even an emotional challenge to get through? Or has it been more just traveling and seeing sights and expanding kind of your worldly view that way?
It's evolved. The whole process sort of evolved. I mean, there was never a grand plan to stay for this long when I first arrived. I just loved traveling, and then I used to just go, okay, I'll just go away for a weekend. And then there was you quit your job and you go for 3 months and do a little check around Southeast Asia. And so the trip started to get a little bit more bigger and a little bit more complex and a little bit more adventurous and ambitious in terms of what you're doing. And they became also my outlet. I found that you asked the question before, am I an extrovert? And I'm probably a little bit of introvert and a little bit of extrovert. I can be life and soul of the party and extrovert, but it drains me and I need to then go away and have my quiet time to recharge.
Mm-hmm.
London as a big city is fantastic, but it wears you down, or it wears me down. And so I recharge by getting out. And so it started to, every sort of 4 or 5 years, I was going, oh, I'm not satisfied with where I'm at. Something's missing. And that would be my sort of driver to go, okay, I'm gonna go off and explore the world. And I'd started doing, trips that were 6 months or even 9 months. And, there would be the different sections of the world that I'd wanted to go and visit. And there was always ideas brewing in the background. There's always been what if we about go and do this? And what if we raft down this? Or what if we try and climb that? Or those sort of things. And they just sort of brewed. And eventually over time, the right time would come and you go, South America, I always wanted to go down there. I've not got anything happening. Bang, I'm going to go down there. And what started as this was back in 2009 or 2010. I was going to go away and visit my cousin in Canada for a week, and within a week it turned into 6 months traveling around the world and quitting my house and just going for a wander. And I love doing that. And so just try to be flexible when opportunity presents itself. If something takes my fancy and I get inspired by it, then I try and chase that dream.
That's cool. And I hear that, I've done at this point around 30 of these adventure episodes. And that thread of what you just said is fairly consistent, meaning didn't have a grand plan. I just kind of did this thing, and then that led to this other thing, and then that led to a bigger thing. And 25 years later, here I am, and I love that because it encourages me to get out of, any sort of rigidity that is my default mode of things got to be a certain way. And as a financial planner, planning money for people, like there is some rigidity that is necessary, but what you're describing, it feels much freer, much more open, and into experiencing the things that the world has to experience. So other than the one you're in the middle of right now, is there an experience that you had somewhere in the world that sticks out as like, that was an epic challenge, an epic thing that I did?
Oh, we need a whole podcast for all of those, I think. I mean, I've done, every time I do something, I think, wow, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. I'm not going to ever beat this. And they've just got bigger and bigger and bigger. They started from when my 2-year working holiday visa ran out, I thought this might be it. I might have to go back to New Zealand and live there. And I spent 9 months traveling the world in 2001. Then, and then 5 years later, I was still in London, and I went to Southeast Asia and China and went to new places in America and everything. And that was great. And then time crept on again. And then it was like, 2010, when I wasn't working, I went to South America, which I'd always wanted to do. It'd been a real big trip. I'd even taken Spanish lessons in 2002 with a grand plan. And it had taken me 8 years to get there. I mean, it was like the decision to go was instant, but it had been 8 years in the planning, because I'd had the idea and I'd had the concept there. I just hadn't, the right time hadn't presented itself. And when it did, it was a really easy decision to make. So I did that. And that trip in South America was a bit of a game changer, because the penny dropped for me when I was in Patagonia and coming out of El Chaltén, having tramped around in the rain and the mud and having a great time, that it was actually, travel and adventure and exploration was my passion. Was the geography that I loved of the world, that I'd always done as a passion subject, when I'd gone and chosen to do commerce and accounting for practical reasons, right?
Yes.
And I realized 20 years after university that actually I should have probably done a geography degree, not a commerce degree. And so I realized that was what inspired me. That was what reinvigorated me, energized me, and what I love doing. Whenever I came back from one of those trips, and I always came back into London, feeling 100% ready to take on the world. It was then, once you were back in the city life and you were working again, and it was a bit of routine in there, you slowly chipped away, and eventually I'd sort of get weary. So off the back of that trip, I said, I got to do this again. I now know why I hadn't recognized the health benefits, the mental health benefits that I was getting from this particular activity. My body and mind had been doing it unconsciously. And then I was like finally caught up. And so I came back from that and decided, right, got to do something else. What am I going to do now? What haven't I done? How can I challenge myself to do something that is beyond anything I've done before? And that's when I came up with the idea of driving across Central Asia, because I hadn't really been to that continent before. I hadn't done a 4x4 driving journey before, and I wanted to go back to Afghanistan, because I had gone to Afghanistan in 2009 as part of the first cricket team to tour Afghanistan and play the national team in Kabul.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And so it was just a bizarre, it wasn't even for a national team, it was for a village cricket side in southern England that I played for, that we just bizarrely had hosted their team years earlier, and they invited us back, and I went along, and that trip changed my mindset around that whole region and what was going on. And so I started researching it, reading the history of the area, And then that's how the Great Game expedition came about, where I drove across Asia trying to retrace the steps of the Great Game, which is the term for the battle for control of Central Asia between Tsarist Russia and British India in the 1800s.
Wow.
And
That's fascinating.
Well, it is. And the history that I read through that there is exactly the same that's being repeated now, right? The British went into Afghanistan twice in the 1800s and left. The Russians tried to get there. It's always been this sort of buffer zone area, and unfortunately, because of its location, has affected its way of life. And they're still making the same errors and mistakes now. The last 50 years, you've seen the Russians go back in there, you've seen the American and the forces go back in there, and so that led to that journey that was just bigger than I'd ever done before. And I filmed that, having never made a documentary or film before, and I came back with 200 hours of footage because I didn't know what I was doing. And I turned that into a 1 hour documentary, and so that's available on Amazon Prime.
Is it really?
Such a great, yeah, it's there.
What's it called?
It's called The Great Game: 30,000 miles across Central Asia. So that's a great, it's the best home video that I've ever made. Because I know that trip and that journey so well now because of the detail that I went into, the planning that went into it, the logistics that were into it, the challenges, facing adversity that I'd never done before, car problems, car broke down, gearbox failed in Iran, spent over a month in Iran because I couldn't get out, there was security issues, there was car problems, there was all sorts, and you just learn to sort of go with it. You had this sort of attitude of she'll be right. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm confident that we'll figure it out. And everything, took a little longer, cost a little bit more money, but eventually it all panned out, and I made it back to London and won.
So that mindset, and I love that you bring that up, because one of the things I try to discover in these conversations is what do people say to themselves? What is that internal language that allows them to push through? And you just hit on it. So I'm curious where you develop that. Is that something you've kind of naturally always had, that kind of self-talk, or where did that come from for you?
The she'll be right sort of mantra that I use is a very sort of Antipodean sort of Kiwi Aussie thing to sort of say, she'll be right, mate. No worries. Yes, And so I don't know. I just probably one of the phrases that I just always used, and then I realized that when things were going wrong, my mindset when I go on an adventure versus my day-to-day life sometimes was right. Rather than it being a problem, it would be a challenge. Okay, should be right. We can solve this. I've got nothing else to do. I don't have any of the woes of paying bills and taxes and everything because I don't have a home. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I've got nothing but to do with focus on this solution. And so once you did that a few times, you realize that actually when you're focused and then you just had a little bit of faith element, and that you'd find out that you would solve the problem quite quickly, actually. And so I got confidence from that, and then I just sort of knew that I'm a believer that if you aim really high, if you can't see where the solution is, even if you only made it halfway there, you'd probably make it further than if you only went as far as you could see and believe that might happen, right? You kind of limit yourself if you don't sort of aim a little bit higher than beyond what you can see possible and see what happens. And these trips have always reinforce that, because you just go, I'll head off into the ether. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm now confident that people will come and help me and share in the journey and help me reach my goal.
I have to think that making it through essentially being stuck in Afghanistan or Iran has to give an element of confidence of, okay, these things can go okay, even when everything comes off the rails. So, and I think that's really encouraging to hear that kind of confidence builds. Certainly there are people maybe that are born very, very confident, but It's the having done the smaller thing that leads to the slightly bigger thing that then leads to taking a little more risk. And I had one guest on here a couple months ago that described it as expanding the growth zone. So he talked about the comfort zone and the growth zone. And you stay in the comfort zone too long, it shrinks and dies. And you constantly have to stretch it. And it sounds like you spent 25 years doing that. And so let me use that as a way to circle back to the current challenge of what you're doing. And you mentioned this to me before, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to highlight this, but your journey with a purpose. You described the Galapagos Postman Challenge as a journey with purpose. Are all of your journeys, all of these things that you do you always try to tag a purpose with it, or is this a unique challenge for you?
No, that's evolved. Like you say, that growth mindset element of things, that's evolved. Because I used to just do lots of travels, going somewhere and everything. And after a while, when you've been to loads of weekend escapes around Europe and everything like that, or you go to places a lot, you go, oh, actually, maybe there's something more that I want to, do this to inspire me. And so the bigger trips and the bigger challenge that I've done now they do have an underlying purpose to them. And the purpose, the consistent element of the purpose is always people, cultures, meeting new places and people all the way through. And that's a common theme and thread through all of mine, is that there's always meeting other people in different parts of the world with an added challenge to it of something that I haven't done before. So I like to do those every so often, just to test myself to see what I'm capable of.
See if you still got it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
So the question that comes to mind about the meeting such, I mean, the range of people that you've met through these journeys has to be vast, but is there a common thread or a common theme that you take away from meeting such diverse people around the globe? What do you take away from having these experiences with people in different places?
That I think we're all pretty similar, right? There's this theory, we're all different, we're all unique, and yes, we are in some ways, but also we're also so similar. We're the human race. We all want to ultimately. Everybody I meet wants to hang out with their friends and their family. They want to have a good time. They don't want too much stress. They want food on the table, go out for a few beers or what it might be, and that's consistent across every culture and everybody that I've met, and the warmth that I get from people that have welcomed me into their lives when I pass through. Sometimes I'm passing through and I'm meeting people and I'm having 24 hours in their life, and they're getting exposure to 24 hours of me, and then we're passing in the thing in the wind again, and I don't see them, some of them, ever again. Others I stay in touch with, and I might see them 10 or 15 years later when I've made it back into that part of the world again. We've stayed in touch, but everybody is quite, we're very similar, and it frustrates me a little bit because of the way the world is and the conflicts that we have. They're over, whether it's religion, whether it's race, whether it's resources and things like that. We're all fighting, saying that somebody else is different and that they're their opposition, and there's a competition element to it. And it actually isn't. When you get to the lower levels of just general people in society, you move away from perhaps the government and the sort of the big business areas. We're all so alike. We're very much alike, and it's just a shame that we do have the conflict that we have, because I've all the places I've been in the world, and places like the axis of evil, like Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, they were my favorite places when I went through there, of the whole regions.
Really?
Because the people are so friendly and welcoming, and because they know that they get it, how they're perceived around the world is not kind of how they are and how it is. And so they go out of their way to show you the hospitality, because they want to say, look, please, this is, what you see on the news is not how we live. That's not, yes, we have issues, but everybody does have issues. We want you to go away with a positive experience. And I've been through war zones. I've been through security controlled areas where I've had police guards and everything, but always a smile is on everybody's faces, even when a guy sitting next to me has got a gun in his hand.
And there's, anywhere in the world, there's going to be bad guys and bad actors that mar the reputation for everyone else. But when you were in these quote unquote dangerous places, were you intentional about steering away from certain areas, or did that even come to your mind?
Yep. No, I look, I don't have it. I don't mind a little bit of risk. I'm actually in my personal life, I'm attracted. If somebody says you can't go here, then I'm like, I want to go. Whereas my work life, when I'm working for clients and everything, I'm risk averse, and I'm trying, you do all these things because that's somebody else's, life or business that's involved, and so I go to places to find out for myself. I don't, the media presents a case that the places, it's got issues, and it often gets portrayed as the whole country is like this. And when you go there, you realize that actually it's just small little bespoke pieces, and work life as general is going on. And so you can travel through countries that might be in massive conflict because you're not going near the conflict areas. And I'm always talking to, local people. I'm getting advice from them. I'm asking where I should go, where I should avoid. And they're always being very helpful. I always try to have a bit of a support team back in the UK or around the world, and that give me local contacts. And local contacts are gold for telling you and showing you how to get around and what to be aware of. So I don't I don't go out of my way to find trouble. I try to actually avoid it. The best way is be preventative and go near and skirt places. And but if somebody says when you're there, actually no, it's not safe, then fine, you change your plan and you keep flexibility about that.
Yeah, it makes sense. So tell me a little bit more about with the Galapagos Postman Challenge. You had the inspiration from your dad and raising funds, but the overall purpose is something you mentioned about connection, disconnection, and reconnection. So speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So part of personally, while I knew I was going to try and do something for my dad with MMD and sort of to shine a light on that, personally, I was thinking, what's my motivation? And I was just looking at where I was here in London, and post COVID, we're in this sort of very social media heavy world that we live in now. That there's all this virtual communication, and I was struggling to have connections with my own friends and family. I wasn't seeing anybody in person. That sort of connection was going, and I couldn't even. It's so difficult to arrange to meet up with people that even lived in London. I'm free in 3 months' time, and you're just thinking there was a frustration that was born out of that because we take how often have we a phone call comes in and we don't answer it. We know who it is and we are going to speak to them later, or you send a message. You don't want to speak to them. I mean, you sort of look at and control that flow in, and that whole personal touch of just picking up a phone and speaking to somebody, going around and knocking on somebody's door and just saying, "Hey, I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd say hello." People think you're a little bit weird if you just turn up unannounced these days. So that was bugging me. So I'm out to sort of test are we living in a disconnected world? In this time where we've never been better connected through social media, why are our personal connections suffering? And I'm asking this question of people as I'm traveling to get sort of more thoughts, get a view. And so I wanted to do something that would have connection and reconnection involved in it. And hence these letters are such a personal thing from one person to another person that they care about enough to have written that letter in a world where we don't even write by hand anymore, right? It's all electronic.
Yeah.
And so it just fitted perfectly with the way I was feeling, was that my opportunity to take these letters, be the person who delivered them in this unique fashion of hand delivered. So I've traveled across the lands to get to them, to deliver this. and then to understand the story of those letters. And then, so I'm trying to reconnect the world one letter at a time by this, and encourage and hopefully inspire people just to, try and reconnect with somebody they might have lost contact with, or, go around and see somebody in person a little bit more, try not to rely on your computer, and just be a bit more personable, and try and, look at that reconnection, because everybody I've spoken to on this topic have agreed. They've said, yeah, look, I don't catch up with my friends. I don't, it takes months. We don't do this. We just seem to be so busy in this world that we live in at the moment.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand, guilty as charged, in that category too. But what a massively inspiring goal to reconnect the world one letter at a time. I think that is really a beautiful challenge to undertake. And it seems to me, maybe it's one of those historical movements that starts with one person doing one thing, right? And that would be
Well,
really a neat outcome.
well, we'll see that. We've got the tracking map that you've seen. That's on the Instagram. There's a link in there that you
Yep.
can see the map that we've got around the world, that we're tracking the journey, and where we've delivered the letters. There's a little icon that flashes up, a little
Mhm.
letter with a GIF, so you can see. And then I've linked in the video so you can see the people who are involved, and the stories behind them are amazing. I mean, unbelievable. Some of the stories of the people that I've met who've welcomed me into their lives with no knowledge of me at all because I'm carrying this piece of paper, with
Wow.
some text, some written on it, and they've literally welcomed me into their lives, told me their life stories, and everybody has got a fascinating story, and some of them have been amazing. And it's just, what I'm discovering is that this little letterbox, right, is connecting the whole world. I mean, what I'm starting to do now is I'm asking people that have got their own story of a Galapagos letter, or that's been delivered to them, and people are starting to contact me now, as show me. I want to see a picture of of what was involved. Hopefully, it's them delivering the letter, or being delivered to them, or them with it. Who sent it? Who were the recipients? And I'm going to start to put those information and those locations onto my own tracking map. So we
Oh,
start
wow.
to draw a list of all the connections that are coming out of this letterbox. And I mean, there's thousands and tens and thousands of letters over years that have been coming out, and while a lot of them go into the ether and don't make it back, they stuck in somebody's drawer, they forgot to make it, the enthusiasm waned, or some people post them, which is like, oh, that's shocking. It's like, don't do that. You got to deliver it in person. There's so many stories out there where I think this one letterbox and has actually connected connections all around the world. And I'm going to try to establish these connections over the coming sort of months and maybe
Yeah, that's a
years.
really cool idea, because I'm looking at the map on a different screen right now, and I can envision that, the red lines being drawn in different places to eventually create a mesh covering of the entire globe. And that would be super cool to see that coming from one letterbox in the middle of the ocean, you know.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, if it catches on, and more people start to hear about it and the word gets out, I think that we'll find dots all over the world, because I mean,
Yeah.
I've got letters for every continent. All the letters that I collected, the only continent that I didn't get a letter for was Africa. Initially. So I've managed to get one now through. I asked somebody that I delivered a letter to in Nashville. I said, "Do you have any friends in Africa?" And then they've given me a letter to send, and I'm going to take that
Oh,
for them. So I've
okay.
kept it within the Galapagos Postman family, of somebody that's, a letter that went to somebody that I delivered, and then they've given me another one. At one stage, I was thinking I might do a dozen or 20 letters, and then ask them to give me another letter destination. So I'd have
Hmm.
no idea where I was going. I had no idea how I would plan it. It would be chaos. I would just be going off the seat of my pants thinking, where am I heading next to try and do this? It didn't quite come out in that way. It's morphed into this one now, where I'm collecting a few extra letters for some locations along the way, just so I get a full globe. All seven continents will get visited on this trip.
What's the most interesting life story that you've heard so far? And how many letters have you actually delivered at this point?
So at I'm 5 months in, and I just delivered letter 23 is in Iceland. I delivered 22 and 23 in Iceland. I've been through South America. I've been to Antarctica. I've been through Central America. I've done a loop of North America, of Canada and the US, and I stopped in Iceland last week, and I'm now back in London for a little bit, and I've delivered 23 letters so far.
You delivered one to
Um,
Antarctica?
No, I didn't have a letter for Antarctica, but I did
Okay.
go to the most southerly post office in Antarctica, in the world,
Huh?
that's in Antarctica, as part of the trip.
I
So,
did not know there was one there.
yes, yes. There's also a post office at the end of the world in Ushuaia that's run by this old guy in Ushuaia who just turns up when he wants to, basically,
Sounds like a
and
pretty
then
good job.
well, it's brilliant. He just, when he needs some more pension money, I think, because he just, whenever it's open, the tourists are there in droves, all buying his postcards and then asking and paying $5 for a stamp, saying that they've got this postcard, and he just makes a killing for a couple of hours and then just goes
It
home.
goes away.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
it's
got it
brilliant.
figured out.
Yeah, mate, he's got a dream job. Dream
Yes.
job.
So back to the question, is there a life story that you've come across that stands out as particularly
Ah,
unique?
there's a few. There is a few, but there's the couple that really stand out that have been amazing, and the ones that you would have read about in the Wall Street Journal
Hmm.
article from a few weeks ago was the love letter to Belize, where I literally had this letter that said, dear Steve, no matter what happens between us, I love you forever, and that was it. And it has name and an address I couldn't make out, so it just was San Pedro Island in Belize. So I just turned up in San Pedro, and then just started detective work to try and track down this guy, and
That's
managed to find
amazing.
him. I found him within 24 hours.
Did you really?
Going, yeah, yeah, yeah. I went online and I started stalking, and I was asking people about the address, and because the address was 6 miles north. That was it. I was like, what does that mean? I went to the local post office, spoke to the
Mhm.
posties, and they said, oh, that's 6 miles from here, and it's in that area. I was like, how the hell are you going to find anybody in a mile zone? So that's how it worked on the island. But I found him. I found some local people knew who he was. He was that well known. He was known as this guy called Tie-Dyed Steve because he always wears tie-dyed t-shirts all the time. And I tracked him down. I found him. I gave him the letter and said, look, here's the letter. And I go, what happened? What happened? He goes, Denise, who wrote in the letter, we've broken up. And it's just
Oh,
like, no,
jeez.
no, no,
This,
no. And
you thought you had the makings of like a Hallmark movie or something like
oh,
that.
mate. Well,
Yeah.
so he then they hadn't been talking. It had only it was fresh that they'd broken up. But he contacted her, and her friend that went to the Galapagos. We all met the next day for lunch. So we
No
brought
way.
everybody back together, started chatting and everything like that. And then I spent the week there with them, going out to parties and hanging out, and we were all hanging out together, and they started talking again together. So they're now back being friendly, and one hopes that
You never
they may
know.
well
Yeah.
get back together again. So
Yeah.
trying to do my little bit for international romance.
Yes. But I mean, if nothing
I
else, that it checks that box that you mentioned earlier of reconnection.
Yep.
Um, that one letter allowed them to overcome the hurdle of whatever anger or bitterness was had ended the relationship, and that's fantastic. That is so cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's that was awesome. The very next letter I delivered, the next three, there's three in a row through Central America were amazing. In Mexico City, I delivered a letter, and I had a friend there because language was a bit of a challenge. My Spanish isn't very good, and it makes, if you can't communicate especially when you're a stranger, they're sort of like a little bit standoffish. So
Yeah.
we rocked up to this house, and it wasn't, a lot of the letters I've been delivering to like gated communities, or people that are that have got their means to travel, and this one looked a little bit different. It was sort of outskirts of Mexico. It was just a sort of apartment building, nondescript, and we pushed the buzzer, nothing happened. We were waiting for ages, and then nothing happened. And we waited until somebody came down, a neighbor came down. We said, look, we've got a letter for this place. Can you go and get them? And eventually they tracked them down. And the girl comes down to the front door and opens and speaking to my friend. And I'm filming this whole episode. And she's going, we're here to see Carmen. We've got a letter for her. And she's going, no, there's no Carmen lives here. And I go, yeah, no, we've got a letter for Carmen. No. And we went around all this for a while, and she was deadpan face, like, who the hell are you guys? This is really strange. I'm not sure I trust what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we showed her the postcard, right? And literally, you've not seen light and day change of attitude, and opened her heart and her smile and everything came, because she'd actually written the letter, and it was from her, the daughter, to her mum, who was upstairs, who was recovering from a hip replacement operation, because she had fallen while her daughter was on a volunteer program in the Galapagos, following her dreams, working with local animals down there. And her mother got injured, and she wanted to come home, and her mother said, no, stay, finish. And her postcard was her writing to thank her mum for encouraging her to follow her dreams. And so we brought that back. They were both there. So she invited us straight in. We're drinking tequila, we're eating dried crickets, and we just had this wonderful, wonderful experience, just connecting them, and because of this letter, and the whole thing was amazing.
Wow. That is incredible. So on the other end of the spectrum, has there been any homes that you've approached and had less than warm or antagonistic responses, and told you to get the heck out of there?
No, everybody there's been a bit of sort of, a gated community. We're trying to get past gated security has been difficult. Who are you here to see? Don't know. Who are you? Nobody they know. It's like, you're not coming in. It's like, you're not coming in. It's like, I've learned, I know how to get around it now. I started bringing the taxi drivers, my Uber drivers became characters in the deliveries in South America, because I'd explain using Google Translate before I got to the destination with them, so they knew what was happening. So then I got them to act as if we knew who we were and who we were going to see. And so they would get us through, get me past security, and then we'd get to the thing. And sometimes it would be staff that they weren't there, and we had to explain, and they would be a little bit, what's going on here? And the taxi drivers were really good at explaining the situation for me, which was helpful. Often we had to sort of leave a little note, and then people would get in touch. There's only been two where I've delivered them and there's been nobody home, and I've tried a couple of times and there's been and I've left a note for them and said, please get in touch, here's your postcard, and I've not heard from them. There's two that bug me that I still don't know, but otherwise everybody else, I know that it's got to them, or I've spoken to the person, or I met to one of the parties, either the recipient generally, or in some cases I've also met the sender as well.
So you're 5 months into it. You're going to take a little rest. Is it going to take you another 5 months to finish the second half?
It's 7. It's a 12 months. My finish date is the 1st of March 2025.
All right. This gets to maybe one of the final questions, but I'm absolutely curious from a planner standpoint, being my background. How are you pulling this off? Talk a little bit about your work-life balance. How long did it take you to plan the logistics? And are you self-funding all of this through savings and income, or are you getting sponsorships? How are you pulling this off?
Sure. So it is a self-funded project. I am still working as I'm traveling, not quite as full-time as I normally do, but I work as a commercial storyteller. I help sales and business development teams win new work through the art form of proposals and tenders. So I can do that from wherever in the world I am. Mostly a lot of it's virtual now, because you can just do it on a Teams call. So I work with colleagues that are designers and writers and other strategists as well. And so I'm running these projects. I've got client work and I'm doing BD calls, and I'm still managing that in a lightened fashion while I'm traveling, which is producing some income coming in. It's not massive, but it's one of my personal challenges for this year was to work out, could I work in a fully digital nomadic way while doing one of my adventures, because ultimately if I could get to that point, then I can do these on a far more regular basis, and there's nothing to really stop me from doing this whenever I want. So that's my sort of test that I'm trying to manage it. So I'm doing a couple of days of work a week. I've got a couple of days, around this project. I'm doing all the logistics, all the planning, all the flights, the transportation, media, a lot of that. I have a small support team of volunteers that are helping me out in terms of, around with media and PR, in terms of contacts. I've got designers that I'm working with at work that have volunteered their time to do the design on the graphics that we're using, that are starting to appear in TV coverage and everything as well, because it's professional branded stuff that we created. I've used this personal challenge to test my own working environment of working with my own colleagues and learning about how their roles and what they need and doing their job to create, persuasive, compelling stories, which is what we use in the business world. And I'm applying those skills across into doing this challenge as well to help with the storytelling aspect of it.
That's really cool.
I'm doing a large chunk of it. I'm getting help, but I'm doing a large chunk of it myself. So I'm pretty busy.
Good. So 5 months in, how would you assess the question? I think there were two questions that you posed to yourself. One is, could you pull this off, be fully digital nomad and make the business side work? And the second question was, earlier you mentioned, is the world really disconnected with as much connecting tools that we have? So 5 months in, what is your assessment on those two questions?
Well, the trip itself and the challenge is I'm pulling it off. I mean, it's been amazing. It's logistics and the challenge and the timing of I haven't been anywhere longer than a week in 5 months, and it's going to be like that for a year. So it's quite, that part is, while trying to work, is tiring. I wouldn't want to. This is ambitious, what I'm trying to do, and I'm just keeping my head above water, sort of thing. And I have to make certain sacrifices, like I'm not doing as much sightseeing as I might want to do. I'm not doing as much sort of outdoor activity, things that I would do if I didn't have a work element to do it, or I wasn't traveling quite at such a rate of speed. It'd be nice if I could have 2 weeks in a location and just take my time a little bit more, but this is the nature of the challenge. So I'm looking forward to just a little break here in London for a couple of weeks, just to recharge, and then I'll be back out on the postal delivery circuit. And then your second one around disconnection, I think we are. I think and everybody knows it as well. Nobody denies it. I mean, I know myself. We all put our hand up. It's actually the awareness to actually make a change, even if it's just to try and actually have, make more time for your people that you're closest to, or personal connections, or don't blow somebody off. We got really bad at, we'll set up a time or a meet for something, but then it'll be a bit of a maybe, and I'll confirm closer to the time, and or you be non-committal about going out to a party or something, and you'll won't go. You'll go on the last 24 hours, you go, oh, sorry, mate, I'm not really feeling up to it, sort of thing like that. And we've got really non-committal about stuff, about just saying, actually, we used to go, like, we're meeting here, we're doing this, yep, that's what I'm doing on that day, and something drastic would have to happen. Just being a little bit more committed to personal relationships, I think we'd all be a little bit happier.
Do you think it's going to change your own behavior and how you connect with people important to you after you get done with this?
Well, it already is now. There's a few people that I've lost touch with, and because I've got this ethos of trying to test this, and I'm trying to reconnect, it's forced me to actually, reach out and try and, catch up with friends, or at least talk to them and reestablish connections, and say, hey, look, we need to talk more. And so, it's having different levels of success. Some, it's great that I'm doing it, and I'm glad that it's getting me over my own whatever that's bugged me, that way I haven't got in touch with them. But then there's some I'm still talking to them. I'm laying this all out to them and saying, "Yep, we got to do something," and then nothing happens. You're waiting for people. I mean, they're just even just sending a little short note to say hi or how's things going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think people struggle with that if there's been a long gap
Yeah.
between speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
They think it's got to be some big sort of epic meeting and planning and a whole weekend. And I say, no, mate, it could just be 30 minutes for coffee.
Yeah.
I was in Toronto a few weeks back. I told a guy that I'd worked with and I knew for a number of years that I was going to be there months and weeks in advance. I was there for a whole week and he couldn't find time to for half an hour for a coffee. We're busy, things are happening, but priorities. Often we
Yeah.
get caught up in some things that we just, we don't take the time to keep those personal relationships going.
Yeah, I think that's a great word. And I think through what your challenge right now is means to me and what I can do with that. And I think that's it. It's being intentional to show up in relationships and with who I am authentically, not, the mask that I can wear in different places. And that's hard at times. And when the gap goes by of I've worn this mask or I haven't even communicated, and now that dynamic is going to shift. That is a hard hurdle. I don't know if it's fear or insecurity or what it is, but what you're doing is inspiring to me to say, forget it. Just one little step at a time. And that's what I see
Yeah, man.
here in your story. It's just one little step at a time.
Yeah, look, it's just, write a letter to somebody or reach out that somebody you haven't spoken to, even if it's just one person that you
Yeah.
haven't, you do, everybody will know straight away. If you start thinking about this, you'll straight away, you'll have one or two people you think,
Yes.
shit, I really need to speak to that person.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't need to
Yeah.
name any names here, but
No,
yes.
Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. You
I think
used to
it's
write to
been,
them when you were a kid.
yeah, I think it's been probably 35 years since I wrote a handwritten letter. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it is, I mean, you're right. It's a lost skill. I don't even know if it's a lost art. It's a lost skill that I do think if I got a handwritten letter from somebody, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It took them time to do that. They couldn't just whip off a text.
The postcard is a genius idea for personal connection because it's even more powerful now than it used to be. Because if
Because
somebody
it's so
actually
different.
goes to the effort to, because the other thing is most people don't know anybody's addresses off by heart, right? Anymore,
Right.
they don't know any phone numbers, and they go, so who do I write it to? It's normally it's family or a very close friend that they know because
Yeah.
they can do it and remember it when they're off the cuff.
So I know your wheels are probably already turning for what's next, but what do you see on the horizon for your next adventures?
What after this one?
After this one, yes.
Oh Christ, no, I haven't even thought that far ahead.
Okay.
No, I'm very much focused on this. This is pretty much my soul. I don't think too far past this because they're quite big, they're quite complex. Your brain you never rests in these sorts of challenges because there's always something to do, whether
Interesting.
I've got to make a little video. I mean, when you get into storytelling and sharing the journey, and then there's a purpose around awareness, and media has now crept into it. There's all these uncontrollable elements that take time, and there's only sort of so many. And so I'm still behind in making some of the videos from the meetings of the letter deliveries that I want to share with everybody.
Okay.
So I've still got that on my back burner to do. I'm trying to obviously raise the profile of the challenge so that people then become aware of the motor neurone and the ALS, and
Hmm.
hopefully then that shines a lot on that. That meant then there might be some more donations or some
Hmm.
just awareness. So that's a big push. I'm trying to do everything I can to raise that. So if anybody can follow and then share my story, just it might make it to somebody else that has some influence, and then it causes some change that's
Yeah.
positive in the world.
That's one of the cool features of social media and for all its negative features, being able to reshare a story into a new network of people that maybe have never heard of you. hopeful that my little network is able to do that, that we replicate that into different parts of the world that haven't quite heard of you yet. So
Yeah, well, you got to watch out. The Galapagos Postman might be knocking on your door next.
I would welcome it. You'd be welcome in our home anytime. And
Oh, yeah.
so let's wrap this up a little bit here. And I guess one way to think about this is we've talked about different adventures, and certainly the one that you're in the middle of. Let me ask you this before I forget. Do you have a fundraising goal for the year? How much money you're trying to raise?
Yeah, 100 grand. I sort of just threw a number out there. I think we're at about 15 so far. So it's chipping away.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. So, would love any contributions to both my fundraising platform in New Zealand, so that I can thank the New Zealand MMD Society that helped my father.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also partnering, because of the UK here. I'm partnering with a charity in the UK called Stand Against MMD, and it's run by a guy called Sam Perkins, who has MMD, and since he was diagnosed, he's just gone, right, I'm going to battle this sucker, and I'm going to fight against it, and I'm going to raise money. He's raised over £250,000 so far. And so I'm anything in the UK in terms of whether it's t-shirt sales or any funds that we get in the UK, I'm going to put into his charity to support that. And then the main thing I'm trying to do is really just awareness, trying to get out there, get the story told so that more people are aware of the challenges that are undergoing, because it's a chronically under funded sort of disease, and the research and the fight against it. So we were just trying to improve things as best as we can.
Is the t-shirt sales and any other merchandise, is that linked in your Instagram bio?
Yeah. So in Instagram, it's Big O Adventures. It's all one word. I'm the Big O. That's one of my nicknames, and my adventures. So Big O Adventures. There's inside that's got links to the tracking map. It's got links to the donation pages, the t-shirt pages. It's all there. Instagram's not that great at showing it. It's quite hidden. But if you go on the profile page, you'll see the links that are in there to the stuff. There's a Facebook page, Big O's Adventures as well, that if you don't do Instagram, you can follow it through that way. And feel free to share, feel free to get in touch. Let me know. And the more people are aware of the project, the better.
Great. Yeah, I will definitely want to highlight the merchandise sale, and we'll link a lot of the stuff in the show notes for this episode. And so I'll leave you with one final question, and I try to ask this to most of the guests, but adventure means different things to different folks, and you've done, I think, a wonderful job of describing how you've adventured at different times of your life. But at the age and stage that you're at and the things that you've accomplished, what does an adventure mean to you at this point?
It's, I guess, the three words that I tend to use when I describe my passion is adventure, travel, and exploration. And within that, it's meeting new people, going to new places, and it's the experiences. I don't really own any physical possessions. Shy of a Corvette that my dad owned that I've still got because it's a connection to him. I don't own anything. I'm very experience based, and going out and meeting people and doing it firsthand, doing it yourself. Don't rely on media or other people's stories. Go out and explore and make your own opinions and come up with your own thoughts on stuff before you judge other parts of the world.
I think that's certainly a great summary, and it's very clear to me that that's played out in all these different stories that you've captured. So you're a professional storyteller, but I think you've also done a very professional job of capturing stories of other people and other experiences. And I'll say it again, I am very grateful for your time to join me on here and answer all these questions to a complete stranger. But now we're not strangers anymore. We now have a connection.
Look, absolutely. It's been an honor and a privilege to come on. We're only ever one icebreaker away from being friends with almost anybody in the world. I would venture, if you meet them in the right circumstances. So this has given me the opportunity to meet you, Josh, and hear about what you do. So, it's all good from my side.
Awesome. All right, Jonny Beardmore, thank you again, and maybe we'll do it on your next adventure. See what you're up to.
Well, maybe we have a chat, and at the end of this one, if I'm
That'd be great.
still in one
Yeah,
piece, no problem.
yeah. Once you hit that 100,000 number and get done with the final letter, let's circle back.
Oh yeah, I'd like 1 million, because there's got to be somebody out there with a boatload of cash.
Oh, yeah.
Want to throw behind this, no problem.
Absolutely.
I'll come and speak at your wedding, or whatever you need. I'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.
All right, thanks for listening. And I sincerely mean that, because I'm extremely grateful that you choose to spend this time with me. I don't take it for granted, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, be sure to check out material on my website at ridgelinewealthadvisors.com. That's advisors with an ORS. And sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Money Trail Guide, which you can find on the blog page. Until next time, I hope you pursue your own great adventure.